Have you ever noticed how every portrayal of Dracula, be it movies or TV, always has him losing? Like every time. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I just feel like if we had a real life vampire lord, he just wouldn't go down that easily. I feel like he'd put up more of a fight. In fact, I think he might actually mop the floor with us. So, food for thought. In that sense, I also feel like I would make a much more brutally efficient vampire lord. If you've had similar thoughts, seek help. But you might be interested in today's topic, V Rising. The idea is simple. You start as a fledgling vampire and work your way up the sanguine food chain to take on and, hopefully, usurp Dracula himself. Basically, it's a vampire survival game. But underneath its blood-soaked surface is an intuitive and well-made game that I haven't seen nearly enough people talk about. So I grabbed a couple of bloodthirsty friends and we've spent the past few weeks playing V Rising. Now, I want to make this very clear up front. V Rising doesn't do anything new. Its gameplay isn't very innovative in any sense, really, but that doesn't mean that the game is bad. Quite the opposite. I actually really enjoy V Rising far more than other titles in this genre. It's a survival game. You're building bases, crafting items, and taking on bosses to progress both your vampire and your castle. But while this isn't anything new, V Rising does a fantastic job at really refining the formula. The things that make me enjoy this game as much as I do are subtle. It's a blend of gameplay systems that comes together to make something wholly unique. Nothing plays quite like V Rising. Let me break it down into a little bit more fine detail and hopefully you'll get what I'm talking about. V Rising is hard to explain gameplay-wise. You could say it's a mix of action RPG and MOBA. Think Diablo meets League of Legends, but that's only really a superficial explanation. You're in a top-down perspective. You move your character with either WASD or joystick, depending on your input. This frees up your mouse or other joystick to freely aim while moving in any direction. Already a great amount of freedom when managing movement and attacks. But in a twist, you can actually rotate and, to a lesser degree, adjust the pitch of the camera. Now this seems silly, right, to go into detail of little controls like this, but these small details permeate every part of V Rising. It's the quality of life features, the fine-tuned control, the actual act of playing the game is comfortable. Shortly into your journey, you'll unlock special crates that allow you to manage your ever-growing roster of supplies with a single button. There's teleporters that you can place to get around your castle easier. There's even a mechanic that allows you to move your entire castle to a new location as you go to these higher level areas. Even down to the game settings, allowing you to customize how much loot you find, how many resources you get from nodes, how difficult enemies are, and how powerful you are. You can really narrow down how grindy you want the game and what kind of experience you want. I know this may seem like I'm getting ahead of myself and jumping all over the place, but I really want to drive home the point that V Rising is very convenient to play. There's plenty of features that help you cut down on the chores and focus on getting you back into the best parts of the game as quickly as possible. The game itself plays the role of Renfield, doing a lot of the busy work and chores so that you can focus on gaining more vampiric power. This isn't just a crimson coat of paint though. The vampire theme sinks into every single aspect of V Rising, and it's not just a surface level idea. The basic idea is that you're hunting down bosses for V blood. Defeating these bosses and drinking their V blood will give new powers for you and new structures for your castle. There's a ton of different abilities you get from these bosses, organized into different schools of heresy. These all have a wide range of spells to use as well as effects. You'll be able to freely mix and match these abilities to your liking. If you want to go all in on unholy magic to create and maintain an undead army, the tools are here. If you want to combine different flavors of magic, maybe mix a smaller army with some buffs to their power, that's also here, and you can freely switch things around whenever you want. There's also jewels to increase the potency of those spells, as well as armor sets and ancestral weapons, giving you more and more ways to increase your power. At a certain point, you'll probably want to stick with a certain playstyle, as the armor gets more and more specific, as well as more and more expensive to craft. If you really like weapon abilities, go with weapon power. If you like spells, take spell power. Of course, V-Blood isn't the only sanguine sustenance walking around the map. Any living creature has blood, all of which represent a certain class, for the lack of a better term. Rogue blood is great if you want to move fast and strike hard, but not all rogue blood is the same. Accompanied with the blood type is a blood quality. Having a higher blood quality improves the effects of that blood, as well as opening up new effects. This is a really fun mechanic where you're constantly having to be on the lookout for good blood types. Just because you drank some really good scholar blood once doesn't mean you won't have to feast again. Blood is slowly and consistently draining, and you'll have to constantly keep your eye out for good blood to replenish and improve your bonuses. There's a really good amount of spells to use, weapons to craft, and bloods to drink for vampiric power, but your actual vampire isn't the only thing getting upgrades. Your castle plays a huge part in progression, and it's really worth spending the time to make a good one. If you have a corresponding floor in a confined room, you can cut down on both crafting costs and refinement times. The actual process of putting your castle together is a lot of fun as well, with one tiny caveat. Building in V Rising is a ton of fun. I really love putting a castle together. It's really intuitive and easy to use, and it often feels like no matter how janky your castle actually functions, it almost always looks cool at the very least. Really, my only complaint with the building are the stairs. Stairs can be a bit of a pain to get right, and good freaking luck if you want to move them. It's a small complaint though, because at the end of the day, I find the act of building to be really fun in V Rising. Not to mention you can create multiple castles, which you can adjust in the game settings. You can have up to 5 castles, all with 5 floors each. You can go absolutely nuts with castle designs, and it's really easy to move things around if you want to make changes later. Well, except for the stairs. Now, let's talk bosses. As I mentioned, bosses play a huge part in the game. You basically can't play V Rising unless you go after these bosses. There's a ton of them, and some of them fall over at your mere presence, while others will beat you to a pulp if you even get within a mile radius of them. But all of them are fun to fight. The V blood powers you'll get from bosses usually correlate to what they do. If you fight a wolf, you can now turn into a wolf. If you fight a skelly man, you get a skelly spell. Each V-Blood has something exciting, regardless of their theme. It's actually kind of surprising that they've managed to make this many bosses and have each one give you something meaningful as a reward. Regardless of the difficulty of the boss, you'll notice that each one has you on your toes for the duration of the fight. This is obviously much easier if you grab a couple of buddies, but my point is that these bosses really highlight the combat's strongest feature. Your power is gated by these bosses, which means as you progress throughout the game, you'll only be able to have so much power before tackling a certain boss. At most, I was only able to squeeze out a couple of points of advantage over any particular boss, and this is very intentional. Despite the vast avenues of power from your armor, your weapons, amulets, jewels, passives, skills, all these things that make you stronger, you still need the most important source of power: skill. Yes, there are ways to get more damage or more armor or better this or better that, but when the rubber meets the road and you're fighting a boss, it's ultimately up to your skill. Dodging at the right times, getting hits in where you can, those are the things that will win you a fight, no matter how good or bad your actual gear is. Ability cooldowns aren't particularly lengthy, but the boss's attacks are just as fast. It pays off to simply walk out of an attack range because that saves your dodge for a more immediate threat. Managing your abilities and movement is imperative to your success with the combat. Your vampire is strong, but that doesn't mean that you can't be defeated. Combine this with the fluid controls and camera movement, and now you have a combat system that demands skill, but rewards it tenfold. Most of my complaints with V Rising are nitpicks, and most of them revolve around those dang stairs. The endgame can be a little grindy, even with bonus loot on, but all in all, it's hard to knock V Rising for much. There's a ton of variety to the combat, lots of skills and weapons to try out. The building is incredibly fun and gives you a lot of freedom, except for those dang stairs. Overall, it's just a really well-made game with a lot of convenience features that just make it a blast to play. If anything you've seen here looks interesting, I recommend that you give V Rising a shot. Usurping Dracula has never been so bloody or satisfying. Or bloody satisfying. Has never been so bloody satisfying. Why did I not write that down? That would have been better. And yes, by the way, I do in fact make a brutally efficient vampire lord.